Last week, our community lost a young man to suicide. Last week, I lost a close friend. He leaves behind his wife, his two beautiful young children. He leaves behind friends and family who are now navigating a life that no longer includes him in it. When I received the news last Friday, all I could think was, I wish he had come to this Brave Talks. I wish he had a chance to meet our next speaker, Craig. And I so wish this was a nightmare. Craig is about to take the stage and share with you some of his darkest days, and I urge you all to please listen with your whole hearts. As a trigger warning, Craig's story will touch on child sexual abuse and on suicide. Please take care of yourselves, and if you don't think you can hear this next story, we wholeheartedly understand if you leave now or during his talk. It is with gratitude I welcome Craig Voss.
There are two things I would like to say before I start. Firstly, I work in financial services and we always start with a disclaimer, lest we get sued for something we've said. So here is my disclaimer. Please understand that I'll be talking about sensitive subjects and using terminology that might be upsetting to some. I will not be offended if you feel you need to leave now or at any time during the talk. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge that my wife, Lara, my children, Jenna, Melissa, and Lawrence, my parents, and Jenna's fiancé, Cameron, are fully supportive of my speaking in public about subjects that are sensitive and private to me and to the family as a whole. They've all been through an extraordinary amount of trauma themselves, so I truly appreciate their support. What is the meaning of life? This is a question that has preoccupied the minds of poets, philosophers, psychologists, religious ideologues, politicians, and everyday people like you and me since the beginning of time. The search for the meaning of life can be a lifetime's work, but sometimes it feels like there isn't any meaning in or reason for living at all. For many people who are contemplating suicide, the crucible question they ask and answer for themselves before making that fateful decision to act is, where is my reason for living? I know this because of my lived experience, and that's the story I want to share with you tonight. I grew up in a happy, comfortable, and loving home in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was a sensitive, gentle, and creative boy. From the moment I entered the equivalent of Year K at age 5, I found myself to be something of an outsider. I didn't fit in with the other kids who were into the rough and tumble of the playground. I wasn't a natural at ball sports, and I didn't like fighting. Throughout my primary school years, this divide became ever more pronounced. Yes, I was bullied and teased, but my torment came more from exclusion. I was ostracized and left out. I felt unwanted. As my parents became less influential in making arrangements for me, my loneliness grew ever more. As a coping mechanism, I learned to pretend. One persona I displayed to my parents, family, and the outside world was the carefree, happy kid. The other was a sad, solitary existence spent deep in my own mind, where I spent a lot of my own time. I created there a steel chamber where I kept all my pain and my sadness. There I could shut the door, lock it away, and carry on pretending. I learned to hide my true emotions from the outside world, even from the people who cared for me the most. Don't want to miss a page. At the age of 12, just months before my bar mitzvah, I was lured and raped by an older man. I kept that event secret, and in that chamber for over 40 years. not even telling my wife. Until, feeling particularly vulnerable and anxious one Saturday morning a few years ago, curled in the fetal position on the bed, sobbing uncontrollably, I uttered those words to Laura for the first time. I was raped. I had spent so long keeping my feelings to myself that saying those words out loud was at the same time a huge relief and incredibly painful. Obviously, I don't know what childbirth is like, but saying those words out loud felt like what I imagined that to be. The harm and damage that event did to the psyche of an already troubled, pubescent, insecure boy was catastrophic. It rubber-stamped all my insecurities. It shaped and dictated my thoughts, actions, and responses to life for 4 decades. But opening that steel door and letting it out wasn't the end of my trauma. It was just the beginning of the end. 2.5 years ago, at the age of 55, I made a serious attempt to take my life. An undiagnosed mental illness, the resurgence of my childhood trauma at the time of the Royal Commission, combined with the quintessential midlife crisis and a multitude of other external factors, resulted in a complete psychological breakdown. So, I'm a victim and a survivor of child sexual abuse and a survivor of suicide. When I woke up in hospital 2.5 days after my attempt, I didn't know if I was dead or alive. Then, I looked over at the faces of my wife and daughter next to the bed. "Hi, baby," Laura said, and I was at once relieved and elated that I had survived. I think I cried with happiness for 24 hours straight. How and why I went from utter despair to joy at being alive took me a long time to understand. But for the first time, I was so happy that I had failed at something. Having come back from near death, I had to learn to live again. But learning to live again wasn't going to be easy. The hard work really began in the psychiatric facility to which I was initially admitted and continued in therapy for months thereafter. What I began to learn was that the unhealthy thought processes and coping mechanisms that had been hardwired into my brain for 50 years needed to be unwired and then rewired in a healthy manner. The lying and deception that had evolved into self-deception had to be reprogrammed. Understanding how my thinking was working incorrectly and then learning and employing techniques to think healthy took a lot of difficult, exhaustive work. Recovery is not easy, but boy, is it worth it. I have been blessed to be aided in my efforts by the unwavering support, the utter devotion, and the overwhelming love of my wife, children, family, and my special mates. In addition, my employer provided tremendous security and stability at a very difficult time. Part of my recovery has been re-examining that initial question: what is my reason for living? I have had to rediscover my reason for being here, my true purpose in life. In my journey of healing, I've learned to stop seeking meaning in life and rather actively pursue purposes in life. I can now set goals, achieve targets, take action, see, appreciate, and gain satisfaction from my achievements. By doing this, I have taken control of my own life instead of looking to other people and their ideas to give me a reason for living. Through telling my story, I have found a reason for living that has higher purpose that goes beyond self-gratification. And in doing so, I can use my skills and my experiences for something worthwhile. Now that I'm at a stage in my recovery where I am comfortable and strong enough to do so, I am sharing my experiences in the hope that I can encourage others, especially middle-aged men, not to be afraid to talk up and to seek help. Guys, we don't need to pretend to be the happiest, fittest, most successful blokes with perfect families. We don't need to be ashamed to speak up and get some help. Please, don't be afraid or too proud. Ask for help. There is another thing I want to share to try and reduce the stigma of suicide. Prior to my own attempt, I would often hear commentary about other people who had taken their lives. Words like selfish, cowardly, and insane. I sadly own up to having said such things myself. How selfish to leave his family behind to deal with all of this. What a coward not to face up to life. He's taken the easy way out. He must have been crazy, out of his mind. When I explained what was going on in my head once I decided to finally do it, I had people come up to me and thank me for finally giving them some insight into the mind of their lost loved one. I have discovered that for the real victims of suicide, those left behind, parents, siblings, friends, family, wives, burning questions remain unanswered and unresolved. Questions such as, what made him do it? What was he thinking? And didn't he think about us? So tonight, from someone who's been there, done that, and thankfully survived, here is what I know. Normally when we face a crisis in our lives, the mind comes up with 3 or 4 alternatives for a solution. But when contemplating suicide, the only choice seems like a long, dark tunnel, like looking through a straw. The light at the end of that tunnel represents only one solution. There are no other options but the one you have chosen. You may believe that it's in the best interests of yourself and those close to you that you die. You would be free of your pain and your struggles, and you will no longer be a burden for others. This is exactly what I felt at that time. I was laser focused and fiercely determined as I drove to my final destination. I was so calm and fearless as I acted to take my life. I was looking at all the things in my life that had caused me anguish and suffering and shouting back, you won't be able to get me anymore. I'm going to finally win. I won't have to deal with the pain, and my family won't have to deal with me. The other thing we often hear is that people dismiss suicide as just a cry for help or attention seeking. My answer to that is, of course it is. Anyone who gets to the stage where they are having ideations of suicide, they need attention. They need help. And now that I am getting help, I can help others. I have a message for all those who have had or are having any thoughts about suicide. There is another light at the end of that tunnel. And it's bright, it's warm, and it's beautiful. I am living proof of that. I love this quote from one of us who didn't make it through. Robin Williams said, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always. That's the default position. Kindness never killed anyone, but an act of kindness may just result in saving someone's life. And is there any higher purpose than that? Thank you.